I want to start with these two pieces, in part because of the underneath piece. So this is a handmade paper, and for artists and non-artists alike, the way you can tell a paper is handmade is it has a decal. It has this little fringy sides. When a paper is made by machine, it has a sharp side like this. Okay? So these are both handmade papers, but the one that's underneath for me is probably the most interesting. Because it's made by a family in Kochi, Japan, and Nancy and Peter invited this family to come to Canada in 20 years ago.
Yeah,
20 years
something
ago.
like that.
And they came to Toronto, Montreal, and Iqaluit, where artists use their papers. They had never been off their from their village. Mr. Ozeki had never been on an airplane. He came with his daughter, his granddaughter, a videographer, and Kayoko-san. Yeah. And so I was one of the artists in Montreal, actually, that was able to invite them into my studio. And they're very, very Japanese. They came to the door and they stood there, and they wouldn't come in until I invited them, please come in. And then they stood there. And what I did with this kind of paper was I wanted to do something that they probably had never seen before. So I bought like a walk brush from Chinatown. I used non-traditional brushes. I used things like rocks to do masking. I used all manner of like really weird things to pick up color in to put it on the paper. And so there were these little chairs, and they kind of sat there and watched me, and every so often Mr. Ozeki, his eyes would get big, and he'd turn to someone else. And I thought, and meanwhile I'm perspiring and trying to be cool, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm talking as I'm doing it for the videographer to know exactly what it was I was doing. So everybody's cool, they're there, I'm not cool at all. And then I had other pieces hanging in my studio, and at that point, after I had done the demonstration, he couldn't have gotten his face any closer to the paintings. He went right, he was tilting like this, and he was talking to someone, and look at that, and blah, blah, blah. So he became all of a sudden very, very animated from this very still Japanese person, and his eyes would get big, and it'd go, and got very, very excited about what I had been doing. So for me, I felt, first of all, it was a complete honor. I speak, at that point, no Japanese. Well, a couple of words, but I really couldn't speak. So I was depending on the interpreters all the time. But the one thing that struck me is he had never seen anybody do anything on his paper. He had seen a calligrapher. Okay, so the traditional thing, calligraphy, ebi fry. So when you get your shrimp, they put a little piece of, not this washi, but another kind of cheap washi underneath. And for them, it was calligraphy, ebi fry, and maybe origami. Okay, that's it. Okay, but to see this kind of thing with pouring and lifting and whatever, it was like, what is she doing? But I think he was pleased. I think he was kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So that's the origin of this paper. So his daughter, who had arms on her like this. She was in her 50s. We're at the university, and she was, with a bamboo stick, she was mixing the washi like this. And Mr. Ozeki was here. His daughter was 40 feet away. He goes, oh, it needs a little bit of such and such. You could tell by the sound of her stirring it, whether it was correct or not. And she could pull, of this paper, I think, 150 sheets per day. They're on big screens like this, they have these, and all you do, like this, that, right? 1, 2, takes 10 years to learn how to do that. And the other paper that they do, she could, I think 150 sheets of that, and they're perfect. If there's a little hole, scrap it. So these are handmade, very precious. Very precious. So these other ones, these big
Okay,
ones.
just before you go on,
Yes.
what is the medium? Watercolor?
Okay, so this part here is ground up pastel, chalk pastel. But it's acrylic, so because it's acrylic, the acrylic becomes the ground. So it's, in other words, because this is dry, it accepts it as, it's like watercolor and gum arabic. So this is all acrylic. When the pieces are this big, watercolor is too expensive. You know, if there's little areas that I need to sharpen up with some color, maybe I'll use a bit of watercolor. But it's high quality acrylic. But I use it in a watercolor technique. Lots of water, lots of medium. Any other questions?
What's the significance of doing the 2 layers?
Say again?
Why the 2 layers?
Why the 2 layers? Part of it was to have the same kind of gesture, the same kind of movement happening over this idea of kind of windows or layers up. And this is a less expensive paper, but it's a good paper. It's very absorbent. It's nice. It's one of the papers that I like a lot. But it also, I wanted you to see the difference between what happens with the same gesture, the same paint or whatever, from that kind of paper. That what, you know, part of it is curiosity too. Often I'll do things just because I'm curious. I want to see what's going to happen. So the other ones I'll talk about are these bigger ones. So they're done with, so the white parts are done first. So the clear kind of white, and that's hot beeswax. So I heat up wax. These are done flat on the floor. Usually put a little space in between. They come 7 meters, so usually I try and do the full 7 meters. I put them on plastic so that I can keep it damp and cover it over when it's in process. I have to make sure my calendar is very clear. I've had enough to eat, I've had enough sleep, and I just clear because I don't know how long it's going to take me to do. But they're done in one, well, when I say one go, it might take a few days. But once it's dried, you don't go back. So if there's areas that I need to work with, I have to keep them down. So that's how that works. And sometimes these are suspended from ceilings and light coming from above. It really depends on what I want to show. And a lot of it is, so all of these nice channels, okay, that's caused by, because they were on these big plastic sheets and the paper does certain things and I leave them. So I work a lot with happy accidents. So all this, see this crazing, all this stuff here?
Yeah.
I would like to say that I did that, but I did not. Okay? I was there and watched it. Okay?
Yeah,
And,
it's fabulous.
you know, but I work very much by instinct through movement. I try to do things, every time I do something, I try to do something a little differently because I want to see what's going to happen when so now that I've been showing with Warren, he's been giving me all sorts of ideas. Great. Yeah. They're, for me, very much inspired by natural phenomena. What happens when water goes into rock and then cracks open, or sand brushes up. So I look at stains on sidewalks. Sometimes I'm there and there's this big greasy gasoline, and I'm standing there looking. And of course, people are walking by going like they're too close to water. You know, so I'm always looking for stuff, you know, shadow, grime. I like to look at things that are very unintentional as inspiration, so that when I see it in my work, I can recognize it. And it's like, oh, that's what that is. Okay?
Yeah.
So I don't know until the thing is finished what it is, and even then I don't know. Sometimes I know, and sometimes I don't know. I'll just say, okay, that's finished, or there's nothing else I can kind of do with that piece, and I just let it go. So sometimes I just let it go because it's like, I don't know what's next. So instead of, and I try to tell my students this, instead of trying to do 10 paintings in one, you do 10 paintings. You can leave something unresolved, it's fine. You know, you don't have to do this cute little thing that finishes it. It's not necessary. You can leave it just open and just wait. See what's next. So those are those pieces.
Heather,
Yeah.
what's the luminous material, the bronzy material?
So that's acrylic. It's just been watered down. So this is the thing, is that, well, this is one of the things about washing, is that you can pour paint. You can, so these areas that are darker, it's because the pigment is thicker, there's less water. Cherry. Oh my God. I'm seeing friends here. And it will stay, and then you can pour something thinner on top, and then you get it bleeds through. So you get all these transparencies. So that last bit, that shimmery stuff, that is like women putting a little bit of blush on their cheeks. It's very surface, okay? So I like to work with areas that are like, so here, you know, where it's deeply pigmented, and you see how this craze is like this? It's because this part was heavily pigmented, and then up against it I did something very watery, so then there's all this stuff that happens. So I'm trying to encourage this kind of thing that happens on its own. And with happy accident, the more you do it, the more it does stuff for you. You just get out of the way. Not always successful. It's okay. It's okay. Any other questions about that?
Do you have a crop after you've done?
Crop?
Yeah.
Rarely. I mean, there is, you know, I have folded the edge over because in this case, I made a little tunnel so you can put something behind it. Is that what you're referring to?
No, no. If you like one area, let's
Oh,
say,
no.
so that's,
Not when
This
it's
is
not when it's like this. When it's like this, it's like this. I just accept it like that. And it doesn't always work. I've got long pieces that are very I don't show them. Or I tear them up, or I make them into something else. That's okay. You have to have make a lot of mess before something comes out. And that's the beauty of this, is that it is so accepting of water and pigment, and you cannot make a mistake. You know, you might get something you didn't intend, but it's not about mistake. So there's a tremendous amount of freedom, and you have to be a little cuckoo also. It helps. It helps.
You know.
Over there, I don't want to take the are that they are transparent, that they are water-loving, that they are absorbent, that they are reflective, and they're a little bit like people. You know, they're all, if you treat them nicely, they behave. Sometimes. And these last ones, I brought these last ones because, you know, I don't live in Toronto anymore, nor in Montreal, so I couldn't bring canvases, and besides, this was a banner, kind of a banner show. But I wanted to bring some of the smaller canvases because I do a mix of canvas work and Japanese paper. So for the with the exception of this paper, which has to be purchased beautiful like that, I cannot get that any other way. It must be purchased like that. But, and this one also was purchased. This is a piece of an aqua tint, an old print of mine from 1977, before some of you were born, I may say. But all the rest, oh, that one too. This was purchased this way. But a lot of these are all purchased this color, but then I will paint on them. I tear them, and then I bring them into canvas works. So these, for me, are like little kind of sketches. And on purpose, they're kind of intense. They're kind of small and intense, a little bit like me, you know. But it helps me go further in terms of what I want to do with my larger pieces that are like 3 by 6 feet. So these are, I don't want to say they're preliminary, but it's a way to push through a lot of kind of imagery before I settle and make very, very large works. They actually take a long time. They don't look it, but they actually take a very long time to do. In some cases, I was telling someone that, the original color is actually this. And then it got painted over and then became that. And so there's a lot of pushing back and forth. And again, it's a little bit like I'm trying to unearth what wants to come up. Because I've been fortunate enough to be able to make art for my whole adult life. I've made certain sacrifices for that. But in order for it to stay interesting, in a sense, the process of working and the materials themselves take me to a place, and then there's a decision I have to make. Okay, it's about this and it's not about that. But I don't come to these with a set idea, oh, I'm going to make a cute little series of paintings and they're going to look like this. I don't know until they're done. And then I look at them and I have to think about, okay, what am I trying to get at in these, and what's going to happen when I start making them big. So there's always a kind of a questioning part to it that keeps it interesting. So I think that's about it. This one, let me just tell you about this one. So the title is Haha Gokoro, which I was told in English translate to every mother's heart. And this series was based on a number of photographs that I took in Nara, Japan 4 years ago. And for those of you who have been to Japan, you'll notice that there's very little garbage. It's very difficult to find trash, somebody just leaving something on the ground. And even less so graffiti, very difficult to find. I'm sure it's there. It's not like here. People don't deface buildings. But I was able to find in little places, little scratchings. And this series came out of that because they were, in each case, there was a kind of a red element and it had been cut into and scratched. And a little bit like graffiti, but they were small and you had to really look. So I took a number of photos of these, and from that came this series. The idea that every mother's heart is broken. Of course, but put together. So that's it.